Alright, so we all remember Adventure Time, right? One of the best shows on Cartoon Network, and in my personal opinion, one of the better cartoons of all time. What's that? You never watched Adventure Time? You were gonna say SpongeBob instead? Alright, yeah, that's enough of that. Fucking hate SpongeBob. Anyways, when we're talking about cartoons, there's very few people around my age who haven't even heard about the show, let alone watched it. And I know we all have our favorite episode, but what about our favorite season, and which one is the best? So today I thought it would be an interesting idea if I went over every season of Adventure Time and ranked it on a tier list, since we love doing that now for some reason. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the lore of Adventure Time, there's going to be a lot of that in this video, so buckle up. Also, just keep in mind, it's okay if you want to disagree with me, but you're wrong. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, good old season 1. We're at the first season of one of the best cartoons of all time possible. It's dead last. Yikes. So I kind of forgot to mention this in the intro, but I'm ranking these seasons based off of how much lore there was in them, how good the lore was, and how many memorable episodes were a part of that season. And unfortunately for season 1 of Adventure Time, it doesn't really have that much, I guess what would you say, substance? Because when I go back and watch it, all I see is just some regular old Saturday morning cartoon, as opposed to what it could be and what it ended up becoming. Now, of course, these things take time, and I'm not saying that a lot of stuff has to get done in one season. But just because I'm saying not a lot of things have to get done in one season, doesn't mean that nothing has to get done in one season. I will say though, the only thing that season 1 has going for it is that it's an introductory season, kind of introducing you to more characters as the season goes on, and I feel like they do that pretty well. However, it just kind of doesn't do a good job of getting you invested in the land of Ooh. Of course, there were some pretty memorable episodes like Donnie. I'm pretty sure that's when Tiffany was introduced into the series. We have Gut Grinder, When Wedding Bells Thaw, and we even have that one episode where Jake loses his powers. And I won't lie, man, I mean, this season would have been higher up on the list if they didn't lie about this. And so for that, like I said before, it's dead last at D tier. Okay, so moving on to season 2, this is really when Adventure Time starts to separate itself from the pack, going from just another cartoon to something more. By the way, this is the season where Jake was literally tweaking out because a horse wouldn't stop staring at him. 10 out of 10. Besides that, we had some really good episodes this season. Primarily, it came from the Nightosphere. I personally enjoy the part of that episode where we meet Hudson Abadir, or Marceline's dad, and we literally start to see him suck souls the minute we first meet him. I swear, man, Hudson Abadir has to be like one of the funniest characters in the show. I mean, if we're really ranking the funniest ones, it's gotta be Jake, Hudson Abadir, and like BMO, my top 3. I feel like the rest of the season was pretty alright, but where it really starts to get good again is during the last couple of episodes, primarily with Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil. In my mind, I feel like this is Adventure Time's first time kind of taking a stab at not only developing the characters more and having an actual story, but also having the events of one storyline play out into another. And for those of you who don't remember, Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil was just about how Finn had to defeat the Lich at the cost of Princess Bubblegum being corrupted by the Lich's essence. All in all, a solid season. B tier. So if you thought that was good, season 3 was even better. As a matter of fact, this season is the highest on our list so far at A tier, simply because of the amount of memorable stuff that happened. First of all, we have Lemongrab's intro into the series. I personally love Lemongrab. His famous catchphrase of unacceptable, smash hit, 10 out of 10. It's so memorable in fact that a lot of people who have watched the series still know and reference Lemongrab based off of those couple of words. This is also the first time we ever see Fiona and Cake. You know, I'm just gonna come out and say it, I never really liked Fiona and Cake, and to be completely honest, I don't really like or get gender swapping characters. It's just kind of weird to me, I guess. But I mainly didn't really like Fiona and Cake because I felt like they tried way too hard. However, that being said, I do like what they did with the HBO Max spinoff, and it was actually the first time I enjoyed a Fiona and Cake episode. Literally took me 12 years, but whoop-de-fucking-do, I guess. Besides that, this season is host to one of the most disturbing episodes of Adventure Time, and it's one that I'm pretty sure a lot of people remember, and that is No One Can Hear You. Pretty much what happens in this episode is that Finn and Jake are on an adventure in the Candy Kingdom and they're fighting some monster. When they both become knocked out, Finn actually gets his legs broken and is bound to a wheelchair the entire episode. Jake seemingly got the worst of the injuries, which is insane to say because Finn literally got his fucking legs broken. But Jake ends up getting hit so hard in the head that he literally shifts into a different person. You see, in this episode, Jake kind of thinks that everyone's hiding from him because it's his birthday. Obviously, that's not the case. and what actually happened is way worse. But the episode starts to ramp up in intensity after Finn literally starts hearing the groans of the damned in a sewer, which actually just turned out to be the Candy Kingdom citizens. When Finn goes to check this out, Jake starts ranting and screaming, talking about how he's gonna ruin the surprise party. That kind of cycle happens a couple of times in the episode, with Finn getting stopped by Jake every time, except the last one. This is where we find out that the reason why there was no citizens in the Candy Kingdom at all, and it was just Finn and Jake the whole time, was because all of them were kidnapped and stuck to walls covered in some like orange goo. This includes Princess Bubblegum and like the banana guards and pretty much everybody in the kingdom. And the perpetrator was a deer who reveals that he has fucking hands under his hooves. I mean, shit, man. Back then, in my little kid mind, you could have taken someone's head off and I would have been fine with that. I turned the TV off immediately after that happened. By the way, the reason why everyone was stuck to the walls was because the deer was actually licking them to the walls, so they were just basically covered in spit the whole time. Besides, this episode reminded me of the Great Philly Cheesesteak incident of my life. We also get to find out in the two-part Christmas special that Simon Petrikov is actually Ice King. This is also the season where we got to see Flame Princess and Flame King and the Flame Kingdom for the first time, and where Meat Puppet Finn choked Jake to death. A tier. Season 4 is another really good season, with us getting our first Greybles, which is honestly the best one if you ask me. And we also got a really good two-part episode revolving around the Nightosphere. This is basically when Finn and Jake wake up inside of a jail cell that's in the Nightosphere, surrounded by a bunch of bananas, which we later find out that this is like a euphemism for just a pile of shit. I mean, seriously, we see one of the demons squeeze it out of his ear, so I don't know. But pretty much this whole mini arc was centered around the fact that Hunt and Abadir kind of really wanted Marceline to become the next boss of the Nightosphere. Obviously, Marceline doesn't want to do that, so he kind of had to force her. Oh yeah, and by the way, that stupid face makes a reappearance in this episode. Once I saw it, it immediately shot me back to that one episode where Finn was walking through the woods, making all different friends with the animals and whatnot, and I kind of forget how, but they eventually get to like this ritual circle with all of the animals, and I forget how it's brought up, but one of the animals is a cow, and she has a bag over her udders, and so she's kind of shy about it. Then all of a sudden the fox yells, "Yo, take that bag off, bro." And it's supposed to be like a support group. She takes it off and it's that face on the fucking udders, bro. And then somebody in the crowd says, "Yo, put that bag back on." Actual comedy gold. Never forget it. Anyways, later on in the season, we also get this episode where a random bear starts trying to be Finn, and it gets so annoying to Finn to the point where he starts crashing out on the bear in broad daylight, like in public too. I'm not gonna lie, I laughed at first, but then I started to remember the bear's voice after and how he was trying to say he just wanted to be like him, and I'm just like, oh damn, bro. Gets me in the feels every time. I felt so bad, man. We also have the Hug Wolf episode, as well as the first Card Wars episode, which was actually so popular that it got adapted into a mobile game as well as a real life card game. That unfortunately got discontinued, but let's just not talk about that. Please, Cartoon Network, I'll do whatever it takes, man. I just need the mobile game back. Ricardio also got a pretty nice reintroduction in this season, and I kind of like how they set up the episode as well. Lady Ranicorn and Princess Bubblegum kind of taking on the challenge, going into like an isolated, abandoned, snowy fort. Made it feel like a real mission. They had heat seekers and everything. It was pretty cool. Finally, this season ends off with some Marceline and Ice King lore. By the way, if you don't know about that, Marceline and Ice King have known each other for literal years. It's just that Marceline knew him when he was Simon Petrikov. However, due to the crown's influence, it just doesn't, I guess, register in Ice King's mind that he knows Marceline. We got some more interesting lore from them on that side. And finally, this whole thing ends off with a cliffhanger going into season 5, where Finn and Jake are pretty much just tasked with a mission to help Billy stop the Lich from destroying the land of Oo by using the Wishmaster Prismo. All in all, with everything that went on during the season and how memorable it was for me at least, I'm gonna give it an A tier.
Hi.
Alright, season 5. A lot happened in this season, and a lot kind of had to happen in this season, with it being 52 episodes, making it the longest season in the series. For starters, season 5 starts off literally where season 4 left off, and this is the season where we get to see the Elseworld version of Finn, in a universe where the Great Mushroom War actually never happened, and the bomb just didn't go off. As a matter of fact, Simon Petrikov was able to stop it with his ice powers, and he's trapped under it, with Marceline guarding his body. By the way, Marceline's like fat and old in this one. Just thought I'd put that in there. By the way, the whole reason why Finn's even in this predicament in the first place is because he tries to wish the Lich out of existence, and this was because the Lich was trying to wish the destruction of Oo, and the person that would be granting this wish was the Wishmaster known as Prismo. And I won't lie, man, Finn low-key gets played in this episode, because even though he's trying to do the right thing and trying to wish evil out of existence and save the world, he ends up dooming that timeline's world just by doing that anyways. This is because in this timeline, Jake ends up becoming the Lich because he gets infected by his essence, and Finn ends up having having the crown, which makes him Ice King, and he starts suffering from the effects of the crown. So he essentially just starts tweaking out on everything. He also ends up cutting Jake's arm off, which has the Lich's essence in it, and it gets split off into like the different multiverses of the show. So it just kind of goes from bad to worse. Anyways, besides that, we have more Greybles, Jake becoming a dad in this season, Goblin King from like season 1 gets a reintroduction, actually a funny episode. And then of course we have the time sandwich episode where Jake takes all these special ingredients, including a bird from the window, and tries to make this god level sandwich, but it ends up getting stolen by Magic Man. We have Dungeon Train, Rattleballs gets his intro, which we get some more backstory into the Candy Kingdom. Lemon Hope is introduced and we have his little arc that happens. And finally, for my favorite episode of Adventure Time, Mystery Dungeon. I swear, man, Adventure Time is like one of the series where you don't even need the main characters to have a good episode. This is an episode literally revolving around a couple of random characters in the show. You have Nepter, Tree Trunks, Lemon Grab, fucking Ice King, Shelby, and Life-Giving Megan, or Life-Giving Magus, I think his name was. He's the guy who can't touch anything with his actual hand or else it'll just come to life and start screaming. But the entire reason why this is my favorite episode, other than the fact that it's just generally the funniest one, there's a part in this episode where Tree Trunks is trying to bake a pie for the group because it's their only source of food, and that smell ends up attracting a huge ass rat from like some tile under the floor, and unbeknownst to the group, this guy starts eating the pie. Lemon Grab catches wind of this and socks this dude in his face, bro. And of course, right after, he starts eating the pie out of the rat's mouth. Like, okay, man.
Acceptable.
And look, man, you know, we had to have our first S rank at some point, right? And I feel like this is an amazing time to put season 5 in that spot because quite honestly, it deserves it. Alright, so season 6, another season that wasn't wasted and was really good, essentially starts off with 2 very important episodes. The first one being Wake Up, and this is where we start to get some lore and backstory about Prismo and about Finn's father. So basically what you see in Prismo's yellow cube, that kind of like pink projection on the wall, that's not actually Prismo. Who Prismo actually is an old man that's sleeping in another room nearby. Now it's very illegal, like on the cosmic level, to go and wake up one of these beings because as soon as that happens, a Wishmaster dies. So essentially Prismo is just a figment of some guy's imagination. Now, the reason why Finn and Jake need to do this is so that they can get into the Citadel, which is kind of like a prison for the galaxy's worst, or it at least acts as like a storage unit for the ones that they freeze. The reason why Finn and Jake both go to the Citadel is because they're still chasing the Lich. And while aboard the Citadel, the Lich ends up breaking out of his confines and essentially just causing a prison break. And just keep in mind, the Citadel wasn't really made to house a being like the Lich, so it was pretty easy for him to do something like this. However, this does come at a cost, because during the climax of the whole prison break, the Lich is splashed with the Citadel Guardian's healing blood, which makes him reboot into a fleshy humanoid baby called Sweet Pea. His full name is actually Sweet Pig Trunks. Fucking adorable. However, another person just so happens to be on the Citadel at the same time as Finn and Jake, and that happens to be Finn's birth dad, or Martin Merton. Finn ends up trying really hard to try and talk with his dad, but his dad just doesn't really seem to want to be in his life. He actually tries so hard to make him stay that his grass arm at the time ends up blowing off, and so at the time, Finn has only one arm. Oh, and also this is the same episode where the fall meme kind of came from, so I guess there's that too.
Fall.
There's a lot of interesting things that happen during this season, primarily Greybles 1000, which is where the main guy who's telling all the Greybles, his name is Cuber, ends up getting stuck like 1,000 years in the future, ends up seeing the barren landscape that is the land of Oo. I think he almost dies to like the ultimate gumball guardian or something like that. I forget what it's called, but he does have an encounter with that which thinks is a threat and ends up shooting him down. We have the Visitor, where Finn gets a vision that leads him to his actual father who crash landed on Earth. We end up finding out some nice things about them. They have a little dynamic going on, if you can call abandonment a dynamic, I guess. You have the episode Dark Purple, that's pretty interesting. Jermaine shows up. Love me some Jermaine, bro. Literally an underrated character in my book. And of course, a really surprising thing that happens during this season is Orgulorg. Orgulorg is a primordial entity that existed a long time ago. He essentially ruled the universe and was called the Breaker of Worlds. The reason why he's not around anymore is because he wanted more power, so he tried to intercept a catalyst comet, which are comets that just bring agents of change to the land of Oo. Things like Finn, the Lich, and so on and so forth. forth. But he tried to absorb that power, and so the King of Mars ordered Rodgrod, I don't know how to say his name, this guy. He ordered him to go fight him and, take him out, which he did, essentially banishing him to Earth, and because of Earth's gravity, Orgulug was crushed into a small penguin who was later named Gunther. So technically speaking, Gunther is one of the oldest characters that we see in the show. But the reason why Orgulug resurfaces in the first place is because Gunther suffers a head injury, and so his brain starts poking out, he starts getting all these powers, and he starts becoming smarter. So he tries to steal a rocket ship that Princess Bubblegum is using at the time to intercept another oncoming Catalyst Comet. Long story short, Finn and Jake end up stopping him. Finn ends up talking to the Catalyst Comet, who also recognizes Finn as a Catalyst Comet, and they have a nice little back and forth, and this whole thing comes to an end with Martin Mertens coming back on a moth, flying through space, and saving his son from drifting in space for eternity, I guess. Honestly, lore-wise, I'd say this was S tier. A lot of memorable things did happen in the season, so yeah, it's S tier. It's our second S tier. Okay, so season 7, it's largely carried by the Stakes miniseries, in my opinion. That was kind of like the main thing that happened during that season, which isn't a bad thing. It's just kind of like less than the other seasons. However, Stakes is a miniseries about vampires, and so obviously Marceline is heavily featured in this season. They redid the intro. I remember watching it live for the first time, and if I'm not mistaken, dude, I remember watching this right after the first regular show movie came out, and if I'm right about that, bro, I was eating good back then. We get a ton of lore into the vampires, how Marceline became a vampire, what she did before she was a vampire, how her powers work, how other people's powers work, and ultimately Marceline ends up becoming a normal human. She's faced with the decision to give up immortality because Princess Bubblegum develops a device that can actually do that and suck out the vampiric essence that's in her body. By the way, I forgot to mention this in the last season, but Princess Bubblegum is no longer the princess of the Candy Kingdom. She got usurped by the King of Ooh, which is actually crazy though. That's a worse betrayal than whatever the fuck happened to Caesar, bro. So because the miniseries kind of carries, I'd say season 7 is our first C tier season. There wasn't a whole lot of other things that were memorable than Stakes, I guess. Maybe you could say Bun Bun or the Normal Man episode, which is pretty good. Sadly, not enough to get us past that C tier. Season 8 is a very important season for 2 different reasons. This is the season where you have 2 different miniseries at the same time. You have the Islands miniseries, which tells you about the humans and their lore, and then you have the Elements miniseries, which tells you about the elemental natures and origins of candy, ice, fire, and slime. So many questions were answered during these 2 miniseries that I could not help but put this in S tier. Another really interesting thing that happens during this season is that Fern, who is the grass version of Finn, someone who becomes a more important character later on in the series, ends up getting killed by Finn because he had an identity crisis that kind of made him go rogue for a minute. He ended up trapping Finn, and then when Finn got out, they ended up fighting, which resulted in him having to get his insides twisted by Finn's arm. Also, this is just me speaking from the editing table, if you want to call it that, I guess. I did forget some things in season 7 that will now raise it from C tier to B tier, that being the Bonnie and Nettie episode. Nettie is Princess Bubblegum's brother. We get some nice lore in that episode, which is then expanded upon further in the first episode of season 9. We get another Card Wars episode, this time with Jake's daughter, where they try to take down Jake's old enemy, Grand Prix. Also, another important thing that I forgot about season 8 is that we get to see Finn's mother, or her Minerva bots, because Finn's mother is actually dead. However, she uploaded her consciousness into what she calls Minerva bots, and their primary function at the time of creation was to help humanity recover from this virus or sickness that was unleashed by Dr. Gross, who is someone that Finn and Jake and Susan Strong also encounter. Still S tier for sure, but it's just a little bit more special because of that heartwarming reunion between Finn and his mother. Okay, now we have season 9, and this season begins with Princess Bubblegum's origin. Well, I mean, a little bit after she was born, I guess. She was a kid around this time. This is before she became the princess and became the creator of the Candy Citizens and all that other stuff. Princess Bubblegum, when she was younger, she created her family, an uncle, an aunt, and a cousin, and they all live together in the same shack that she now lives in with Peppermint Butler since she's been usurped in recent seasons. Long story short, some characters that you are familiar with ever since episode 1 of season 1 had been the real villains the entire time and we just didn't know. So of course these three look differently than when Bonnie was actually growing up with them, and the reason being is because of the Dum Dum juice. This was a liquid that was made by the uncle of the family. His name was Uncle Gumbald, and he tricked cousin Chicle and his wife into eating cupcakes that were laced, turning them into Crunchy, that pinata from episode 1, I forgot what the pinata's name was. And ultimately when Princess Bubblegum caught wind of this, she was able to trick Uncle Gumbald into spilling the juice on himself, which turned him into that fruit punch bowl that you also would see in episode 1, I believe. In addition to that, we also get Jake's origin and how he actually got his powers. He's not technically the son of two dogs, and you know, he didn't just get his magical powers from some pool of mud that season 1 told us about. He's actually the child of an alien called Warren Ampersand, who can stretch just like Jake and has many children all throughout the cosmos. Okay, and before we continue, I realized I made a mistake with the rankings. I accidentally combined season 8 and 9 together. So what I'll do is, instead of putting them in S tier, I'll slide them both down to A tier. They're still really good on their own, obviously S tier together, but that was my mistake. Sorry. Anyways, anything that I've been saying about Princess Bubblegum's origin and Jake's origin, that all happened in season 10. So we are currently in season 10. Now, with this being the last season of the series, it's the shortest, and it also has a really good crossover episode with Minecraft. This whole story comes to a bittersweet ending though, because at the time of its airing, obviously we didn't know about the spin-off series that would be coming to HBO, and even then it still doesn't really feel the same. However, the story of Adventure Time would come to a pretty good close, with it ending in a war arc of sorts. It was just like a big battle between the kingdoms of Gumbaldia and the original Candy Kingdom. Now, the kingdom of Gumbaldia was led by King Gumbald, or Uncle Gumbald, and you might be asking, how did they turn back into, you know, their original selves? Well, after the Elements miniseries concluded, just at the tail end when Lumpy Space Princess started to make everything normal, because apparently Lumps is the anti-element, that essentially just turned everyone back to normal after them being consumed by either the essence of candy or the essence of slime or frost or fire. Elements is a good miniseries, you should watch it. But Lumpy Space Princess did her thing and she turned everyone normal again, and that includes cousin Chicle, the aunt, and Uncle Gumbald. And of course, with them realizing that so much time has passed, they decide to construct their own kingdom separately away from the happenings of the Candy Kingdom. This, like I said, ends up in a giant war where we eventually see Golb again. We previously saw him in another episode called Puhoy. Golb is ultimately sung away as everyone on the battlefield doesn't want him there. So they start singing, because Princess Bubblegum is able to deduce that since Golb is discord, order is the opposite of that, and that hurts him, so he goes away after merging with Betty. Betty is Simon Petrikov's wife or lover or whatever they were, and so that's why you see in the Fiona and Cake miniseries, Simon's just living alone. Ultimately, this is what the tier list is looking like, with us making numerous revisions throughout the fucking episode, because the website that I was reading off of decided to combine season 8 and 9. My fault for not recognizing that, but I don't really know if there was a reason to do that in the first place. Anyways, guys, I hope you did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button. If you want more content similar to this, hit that subscribe button. See you guys in the next one. Sub up, stay safe, and peace.